Bandwidth for this podcast is brought to you by Ideate Software. Be sure to check out all of their great Revit applications designed to increase your productivity.
Starting the recording now, which means you are starting the listening now of BIMThoughts. Whew. So today we've got Carl Storm, we have Dana DeFilippi, and we have Vince Auletta. And Vince is with a great company called Parsec.
Yes.
Before he tells us about Parsec, why don't you define yourself?
Oh, boy. That is a challenge. This is not what I was expecting you to ask me to do here, Bill. So, all right, how do I define myself? I'm a human male. I'm into technology, gaming, photography, videography, and I'm an outdoorsman and an Eagle Scout. So
wow.
I try to be a hybrid human of both a tech nerd as well as an outdoorsman.
So what was your Eagle Scout project?
My Eagle Scout project was building an outdoor reading area at my elementary school, as well as beautifying the surrounding area so that the kids could go outside and practice reading outdoors rather than being inside.
That's great. Is it still there?
It is, yeah.
Really?
Yep.
Doesn't that make you feel good?
It does, yeah. I did it in 2008. So
wow. So it's
strong.
Been there for a few years.
Yeah.
Well, I asked Vince to be on because at the LPAers, we have tried Parsec. LPA does not endorse this product. And it's working quite well. So I thought that it's time to share it with our BIM thinkers because we've used it for a while. And now I feel a little bit more comfortable in telling more people about it. So Vince, tell us what Parsec is.
Love it. All right. Yeah. So Parsec at its core is a high performance remote desktop technology. Now the high performance first two words there, or hyphenated first word, is really the key, because that's what differentiates Parsec from all the other remote desktop applications that everyone out there is familiar with. Mm-hmm. Parsec was actually designed from the ground up to support remote gaming. It was built as a free, in fact, consumer application to allow gamers to access their gaming rigs remotely and to allow gamers to play local-only multiplayer games together over the internet. And then the pandemic hit, going back to early 2020, and all of a sudden the customer base, they weren't really customers, they were free users that had been using Parsec, for what I described earlier, discovered that Parsec could also really help them do their jobs, particularly to develop games. So a lot of Parsec's early customers were gaming industry veterans that had been using the free version of Parsec, but then realized that if Parsec provided an enterprise product, it could really help them work from home as well. And that was kind of where Parsec for Teams and Parsec Enterprise was born. It was out of the strong demand from the enterprise gaming space to provide a product that really filled a gap that no other products could do. So because Parsec was designed from the ground up to support what we like to consider as the most difficult workflow, or the most difficult thing you can ask a computer to do, which is render a game at 60 FPS in real time. Because we started with that, we kind of tackled the toughest problem first. And now we're discovering that not only is Parsec really, really handy to support those gaming work from home workflows, but it's also really popular in media and entertainment, in AEC, and many other industries that need high-end workstations in order to do what they do.
Right. And that's what I figured out fairly early on in the pandemic times when we tried to do remote desktop and SketchUp wouldn't work and Revit was a lot slow. Inkscape wouldn't work. What about, I'm sure there has to be a technology out there that works with games, because games is GPU based, and that's what our software is that's what we were lacking in remote desktop, was the GPU part. And then we tried doing VDI, and that got expensive real quick.
Very expensive, yes.
And then it got even more expensive real quick, because then we figured out what we really needed for it. And then we found this, and it's like, this is great. So what makes it different than remote desktop or TeamViewer or
Yeah,
whatever
that's a
the other
great
ones are.
that's a great question. So first and foremost, it's our frame rate. Parsec always tries to make it seem like you are sitting at that remote computer, even though
Mm-hmm.
you're not actually sitting at that remote computer. And the way that we do that is by always maintaining a high frame rate, 60 FPS or more, and a low latency stream. Now, of course, we can't do anything about the latency of the internet. So the further away that you get from the machine that you're connecting to, of course,
Mm-hmm.
you are going to add latency. But
Right.
we at Parsec have taken a lot of care to make sure that all the other steps in the process, so the encoding process to actually capture the desktop, turn that into a video stream, and then send it out over the internet, there's actually a variable amount of time that that process can take. And then similarly on the decode side, on the client device, where you're taking that video stream in from the internet and then you're decoding it and you're rendering it out on a monitor, that process can also take a variable amount of time. So obviously, like I said, we can't do anything about the network latency, but we can do a lot to minimize all of the other latencies that occur in the
Mm-hmm.
chain. So minimizing latency and maintaining an ultra high frame rate are really how we differentiate ourselves. And then on top of that, we have features like 444 color encoding and support for Wacom tablets and Cintiq displays that are very, very common in M&E,
Wow.
AEC, and gaming. So not only can we be used to access your high powered workstation, but you can also use your drawing tablet with perfect color to do that at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Does it matter what hardware you have on the other end, on the home end?
It does, but nowhere near as much as it otherwise would. So
Okay.
part of Parsec's secret sauce is that we always use the GPU whenever we can, or we always use hardware acceleration. Now, a lot
Okay.
of people's home computers aren't going to have a dedicated graphics card, right? They're not going to have an NVIDIA GPU or an
Right.
AMD GPU. They're probably just going to have an onboard GPU. Like most Intel processors that are now in laptops, whether that's a
Mm-hmm.
Windows or a Mac laptop, those all ship with an onboard GPU in addition to the CPU. And Parsec can actually leverage that just as well as we can leverage the dedicated GPU from NVIDIA or AMD. So when it comes to having a really great experience on a low powered client device, we can do that because we're leveraging the hardware acceleration that is built into your client device.
Okay. Yep. And what we found is we can now have laptops that are like i5s with 8 gigs of RAM.
That's right.
And because we've figured that out, we were able to give everyone at LPA a laptop to use at home, which helped them out because now they've got a new machine to work on. It's on the domain. It's supported by LPA's IT department, so we can fix it if there's a problem. And it's more secure because we control it. We, meaning LPA, controls it because we control that the antivirus is up to date. We control what access they have on it and so on and so forth.
Yeah, whether or not they can install their own software and all that.
Right.
Yeah.
And that machine really isn't designed to run the applications. It's designed to run the remote application. And it's designed, we install Office on it so they can check email if they need to do that. But the graphic applications aren't even installed on those laptops anymore. So now they just remote back to their desk. And so by doing that with Parsec, we were able to leverage that investment we had in desktops as opposed to adding more investment into VDI.
Yeah, or cloud workstations, and
Or cloud.
that's a great
Yeah.
differentiator as well, Bill. I'm glad
Uh-huh.
you brought that up because not only does Parsec work really great on existing hardware that you've already purchased, it
Uh-huh.
also works really great up in the public cloud or on top of a VDI solution. So really, no matter what type of infrastructure you're interested in running on, Parsec can be your high performance avenue into that infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill, I'm curious because you mentioned everyone now has an i5 laptop.
Right.
Were you guys considering giving everyone a high-powered workstation at home as well as in the office? And
Yes.
what was the cost difference like between that laptop and that high-powered workstation?
I don't know the cost difference. I think it's probably $1,500 to $2,000 per laptop difference.
Got it. So probably, you're saving 50% or more by using
Oh,
laptops
yeah.
instead of these. Gotcha.
Right. and they're, in air quotes, almost disposable.
That's
I
right.
mean, they're not disposable. We don't want you to ruin them. But if they do get ruined, it isn't like, oh my God, that's $2,500, $3,000 out the window. It's send it back. We'll send you a new one right away.
That's right.
So my guess would be that would mean that you could buy the high performance desktop and the client size or the thin client type laptop really
Right.
for the same price or less than a workstation laptop.
Probably. But we already had all of those workstations because we just got done with a desktop refresh in February 2020. So everybody had new desktops already. And so it's like, crap.
That's true. Yeah, leveraging existing investments is a huge kind of reason that people choose Parsec. Carl, to your point though, a lot of the time you can buy a gaming laptop or a professional laptop with the same or similar spec as a desktop workstation, but ultimately, if you look at things like the way the laptop is going to have to throttle things due to heat, and the way that the laptop is going to just overall be kind of limited in power compared to a desktop. I think you'll find that not only is investing in the workstation in the studio and the low powered laptop for people's homes is not only is that more cost effective, but it's also going to be more efficient from a work output perspective because those workstations are just that much more powerful and more capable of processing things.
Right. What limitations should we expect?
That's a great question. So Parsec is a real-time streaming protocol that uses UDP under the covers. And what that ultimately means is that Parsec and most other remote desktop streaming applications are sensitive to what we call congestion events. It's packet loss, it's spikes in latency, it's jitter, it's all the things that drive your VoIP system crazy, or that make your video streaming experience less than ideal. So Parsec does deal with those issues of packet loss and the variability of the internet better than a lot of our competitors, but that doesn't mean that we are immune to the latency and the loss of the public internet. So generally when we see issues, it's because users are on a low quality internet connection that maybe has a lot of contention for those resources, or they're on a really old underpowered device. Parsec works really well with devices that go all the way back, like say as far as 2014 or 2015. But sometimes we will have customers that try to use us, for example, on a 2011 or a 2012 Mac Pro, and that has an AMD GPU in it that doesn't even have one of these hardware decoder chips for accelerated video decoding. So that's an example where, yes, the old hardware will work. A 2011 or a 2012 cheese grater Mac Pro will work as a Parsec client, but the overall user experience on that sort of machine is just not going to be as good compared to something that's even from 2015 or 2016.
So what about if we move forward to current times and the devices that blow the line, so the latest and greatest iPad Pro or the brand new services that are coming out that are something else, not quite a laptop, but are you able to take advantage of these ultra portable devices as well?
So we are in the case of the Microsoft Surface, because Windows is really our bread and butter here within Parsec. We do support macOS hosting. In fact, that was a really, really big deal that we released that last month. However, we're not yet there on our iPad experience. So for your iPad example, that's not something that Parsec can support today, but it is something that we really have our eye on supporting in the very near future, probably Q1 of next year, if not sooner. But the Surface tablets work really, really well with Parsec.
That's good to know. So basically, any of those 2-in-1 convertible type of devices, that's it's a laptop, but it's that ultra portable form factor is still going to work. You're still going to be able to dial in and do your work or play your games from
right.
your system at home.
You got it.
And then another thing we need to realize too, this from the technical side, is all of these remote applications, no matter which one you choose, they all have compromises with them. Either you get good performance for speed, or you get killer image quality where it's perfect every time. What we've noticed with Parsec is the image quality isn't like you're in front of the computer, but it's much better than we thought it was going to be. It's very usable image quality. So be aware of that. It's like when you're doing Enscape or you're doing renderings and things like that, the image quality might be not what you expect, or it's not going to be the same as if you're sitting in front of the computer, but it's very close. The other thing we've noticed is Parsec, unlike remote desktop, you can actually see what people are doing on the monitor because it's transcoding the monitor or the video signal. And do you still have to have a keyboard and a mouse hooked up?
So you still need a mouse or a mouse driver that emulates a mouse, but you do not
Okay.
need a keyboard.
You don't
We're
need a
working
keyboard
on that,
anymore.
Yeah.
And there are little dongles that you can get to plug into the video card to emulate a monitor.
That's
well.
right. So we support those headless dongles.
Uh-huh.
Some people call them dummy plugs. We
Mhm.
also more recently support what's called our virtual display driver. So
Oh.
rather than needing to have a physical monitor connected or needing to have those headless dongles connected, we can actually virtualize up to 3 displays in Windows. So we can run on a fully headless machine.
Is there any performance difference in that between the traditional way?
So we only see performance impacts with the virtual display driver on older versions of Windows. Say Windows 10 1909. So Windows 10 versions 2019 and older don't have some of the underlying libraries that we use to accelerate that virtual adapter. So either the virtual adapter doesn't work on those old versions of Windows or it doesn't work well. But thankfully, on the newer versions of Windows, say 2020 versions or newer, and certainly on the 2021 versions of Windows, there's no performance impact to using the virtual display driver.
Okay. And how's Windows 11 coming along?
As far as we've tested thus far, it works great. We haven't needed to change anything, but we haven't dived in too deep to Windows 11 yet.
Right. Yeah, well, it's not out yet either. So. But it will be soon.
We have done some testing, though. One of our QA guys does have it installed and has done quite a bit of testing.
So I think from that discussion, taking a little bit aside from the virtual stuff, that does mean that you can support up to 3 actual monitors. So I have 3 monitors at my typical workstation if I was doing remotely, and one of those same 3 monitor experience. One of them is my laptop, but we'll say 3.
Okay.
That's still supported. So I could
Absolutely.
run 3 monitors. Nice.
Yeah, we support streaming up to 3 displays at 4K UHD resolution for each display.
All right. That covers all the space I need. And as soon as you start, allowing you to have 3 or 4 or 6, then we want that. Because I never thought I'd want more than 2. But one day I left my laptop screen open, and I'm like, hey, I kind of like this 3 screens things, and now I'm hooked.
Now you're hooked. Yeah, 3 screens the best. Yeah. So, what about? Let's see. So, what do most people realize when they get Parsec going? What benefits do they find?
Well, man, that's a really good question. A lot of the time, they discover that they can do things that they previously could only do in the office. But now with Parsec, they're able to do those things effectively at home. So where they were blocked using their previous remote access technology, whether that was RDP over a VPN or TeamViewer or what have you, they often discover that when they start using Parsec, a lot of those limitations or inefficiencies are removed, and they're able to operate much more akin to the efficiency that they were at when they were in the office. We hear that a lot. Parsec has gotten me back to 95% or 98% of how efficient I was when I was actually sitting in front of my workstation in the office. And then another thing that we hear from a lot of customers, especially IT teams at customers, is how easy Parsec is to get set up and running, especially if you compare it to something like, some of our other more traditional competitors that are very, very involved for the IT group to get up and running. Because Parsec came from the consumer gaming space, where we didn't provide any support, we weren't charging anybody any money, we had to make the application super easy to use and intuitive. And thankfully, that ease of use and intuitiveness carried over to the Teams product and the enterprise product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the stuff that the Teams and the enterprise product has brought to us. The single sign-on, the ability for us to have a gateway in the office. There's lots of advantages for the IT side. As far as the end user side, well, it's easier because they don't have to log in 4 times. They can just log in the 1 time.
That's right. Yeah, and Bill, we actually have some new enterprise features that I don't think we've made you aware of yet. And I don't want to make this about Parsec's features. I very much believe that, Parsec's value, outshines all of the features, kind of what I was just talking about around improving efficiency. But for the IT folks out there that are listening, we recently launched 2 new features for your enterprise IT departments. We recently launched Audit Logging, which means that if you wanted to see who connected to where, when, with a full audit trail, and you want to integrate that with your SIM like Splunk or Elk, you can do that now with Parsec with the enterprise license. The other thing that we recently added is we added what's called Rbac, or role-based access control. And for large organizations, this is really critical because it gives them the ability to define their own administrative roles rather than relying on the predefined roles that we previously had in the product. So you could think of this kind of like AWS IAM. It gives you the ability to define your own administrative roles, which is super flexible for those large organizations.
That's great. How much logging does it actually do? Is it just you logged in, you logged out?
So it logs just about everything. It logs logins and logouts. It logs connections, as well as failed connections. So if someone attempts to connect to a computer and fails, we'll log that. If someone attempts to connect to a computer and succeeds, we will log that. We also log administrative actions. So if you wanted to know who added this member to your team or who removed this member from your team and when, all of that is logged in the audit trail.
Oh, that's good. Dana, you have been quiet.
I'm just taking it all in. I'm not really that great with hardware, to be honest.
You're doing remote access stuff.
Yes, I am doing remote access stuff. I am 100% virtual.
Yes.
I really enjoy it.
Do you? You like working from the home?
But I think Autodesk makes that easy with everything being on BIM 360 now.
It does. It does.
You know, Teams.
Mm-hmm.
We live in a virtual world. It's the new normal.
This is the new normal, unfortunately. Or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. Some days I miss going into the office. Other days I'm glad I didn't go in.
If I did have to go into the office, I certainly wouldn't want to commute from where I moved to.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I would definitely rather ride my moped like I used to within the city. But that's okay.
But that's okay.
Yeah, hopefully it won't have to happen. But no, I have a really wonderful setup. I have a ThinkPad with my HP curved monitor. I do a hardwire into my modem just for the sake of speed.
Good for you.
You get too much stuff. Well, I have 2 complete PCs on my desk.
Wow. Do you use one of them for gaming? Are you a gamer? An online gamer?
I am not an online gamer.
I wouldn't take you for one.
The game I play is Kerbal Space Program.
It's a great game. Really popular, actually.
I just got into it right when they stopped making version 1. So I can't wait for version 2. But yeah, it's a tough game. But once you get it figured out, it's fun.
Is it like a type of first-person game?
It's a space simulator. So you build rockets and launch them into space and try to achieve orbit, all that other stuff.
Wow.
So one of my best friends has his PhD in astrophysics. And Kerbal Space Program is one of his favorite games in the world.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, the story I heard about the making of it was first a space simulator game, and everyone found it boring. And then they added the little green Kerbals to it, and then everyone loved it. Because now they had someone to launch into space.
So we've been talking about a lot of work from home and kind of the idea that people worked from the office. They had these big desktops. Now they're working from home and they're dialing in and using
Right.
sort of remote scenarios constantly. My question for you, Vince, is what about a slightly different workflow? Somebody that works from home all the time, has a nice desktop at home, but on occasion needs to travel, say, the conference circuit. So the idea there is not being able to carry the big honkin' brick of a box with all that stuff with you. Is this something that can work in that scenario where Wi-Fi, or not Wi-Fi, internet might be an issue?
It will work, yes. Just keep in mind, and these are very related points that I'm about to make, is that typically home internet connections are not symmetrical in their bandwidth. And what I mean by that is they'll have a much faster download speed than they will have an upload speed. For example, when I lived in Los Angeles, I had Spectrum cable for my internet provider, and I had 300 megabits download, but I only had 10 megabits of upload. So very, very big discrepancy there between the download and the upload speed. So if you want to stream from your home computer, that is certainly possible. Just keep in mind that your home computer's upload speed is not going to be anywhere near as good as the upload speed for a machine that's in the office. And now that's actually a really critical point to what you were making, or to the point you were making about how some people choose to work from a high-powered laptop at home or choose to work from a high-powered workstation at home. Most of the people that we deal with that took that strategy early on in the pandemic very quickly discovered that that home upload connection, or that home upload speed, became the bottleneck. They could very easily download all the assets that they needed from, the central storage in the office, the NAS or the SAN or what have you. But once their work was complete and they needed to upload the result of that work, the output, back to the storage in the studio, that was when things really started to slow down. So by keeping the work on the workstation that's in the studio, where it has that high performance access to storage and that high speed connection to the internet, you get more efficiency gained than just, the local experience of the computer, because there's a lot more that goes into doing, an enterprise, art workload or design workload or whatever it is, than just running the application itself. There's the rendering, the uploading, the downloading, all that.
I was just going to say that comes into play because that hadn't even crossed my mind. I happen to be in an area where I have gig down and gig up. So that
Lucky you. Yeah.
Lucky
yes,
you.
well, it's a new
And-
neighborhood, so brand new fiber.
So do you have gig up and down?
940 megabytes, but yeah, we're going to call it gig up, gig down.
Yeah, I have
That's
I have
amazing.
940 down and 35 up.
Yeah,
That's
so
where I'm at.
so that's nice, and the fact that it's fiber is also nice. I'm not sharing, so it doesn't matter if the neighbor, there's not a 7 o'clock peak where the bandwidth goes down. It's constant. So that part is nice. So hadn't even thought of that, but luckily I'm out of that woods. So then it comes to the issue on the other end, and not so even if we take the conference out of the way, the fact that you could use it sporadically for that type of scenario and get good performance. You had mentioned earlier the distance from your home computer. So other side of the world, as an example of, you can't get much farther than that.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you the most typical IT answer, which is it depends. And it really depends on the workflow. So I'll give you an example of a really, really great customer of ours, which is Activision Blizzard. They're a reference customer on our website, so we can totally talk about them publicly. They use Parsec to produce all of their esports content. So the live streams for the Call of Duty League, the Overwatch League, the StarCraft League, and really all of the games that Blizzard does esports for, and Activision that they do esports for, all of that production these days is all being done in the cloud, and it's all being done, or that cloud infrastructure is all being accessed via Parsec. And not only that, but part of their workflow is to control in-game cameras. So imagine you're producing an esporting event for a first-person shooter. It's very similar to producing, an NBA game or an NFL game, where you have a bunch of cameras positioned all over the quote-unquote stadium, and then you have a producer that's switching between those cameras to show the action. When you're playing a doing an esport in a video game and you're broadcasting a sporting event in a video game, it's very similar. Except the cameras, instead of being physical cameras in the stadium, they're now virtual cameras in the game world. And what Activision Blizzard does is they use Parsec to control virtual cameras that are in Seoul, South Korea. But the people that are operating those virtual cameras are actually in Los Angeles. So they're connecting all the way across the world with over 200 milliseconds of latency. However, because their workflow is such that they can do it with that 200 milliseconds of latency, it's okay for them. And in fact, they've saved 7 figures of T&E budget by using Parsec instead of flying their operators around the world, which is what they used to do in 2019.
Wow.
So yes, latency matters, but it depends.
Yes, and I guess that answers the question, is that the technology and the back end behind Parsec can handle it. And your IT answer is, I use the same thing during our demos because our BIMTrack is a cloud-based product that you can't account for the Starbucks cafe internet or the Wi-Fi in the hotel or whatever the case might be. But as long as you have conditions that are favorable, the platform can handle it.
That's right.
Even from the other side of the world.
Yeah, you got it.
Nice.
Carl, I'm going to give you the final thought.
Well, I appreciate that, Bill, and I've used all of my thoughts.
Well, that's why I gave it to you, so that you could be on the spot and think of a new one.
How would this support a VR scenario?
That is a really good question, Carl. So once again, it's an it depends answer. We don't support streaming stereoscopic video. So we're not going to give you the 2 eyes in the headset. However, what we can stream is the 2D rendering. So, and what I mean by this is, you can have your VR headset on and then someone in the room with you can watch what you are seeing in VR on your computer monitor. We can stream that view. We can stream the view of what the person in the helmet is seeing, but we cannot actually stream the helmet itself. Or the goggles, I should say, the helmet.
So in that means that if I have the physical device with me, the goggles, your Rift or your Go or whatever the case may be, and it's attached to my laptop, I could take advantage of the super duper GPU on the device back home to be powering the experience?
You can, yeah. And there's actually an NVIDIA specific protocol or product for streaming VR that we've heard works really, really well over Parsec. So if you want to, for example, use, I heard this actually from some guys at Google Cloud. They were streaming VR from a GCP instance using this NVIDIA VR protocol, and then using Parsec as the client to cloud connector. So I don't have many more specifics than that because our core customer base is not doing VR, but I would encourage you to try it out. Download the free consumer edition of Parsec, which I would encourage anyone who's listening to this podcast to do. Download it, try it out for yourself. It's completely free. If you have any questions about the performance or software compatibility or anything like that, just go ahead and download it and try it. We're pretty confident you'll be impressed.
Yep.
Yeah, we might have to reach out to the Armadillo because I know he does a lot of VR streaming using the NVIDIA. So that would be curious. And that's my final question, Bill. You made me bring it home, and I did.
You did well.
So I just looked it up. It's called Cloud XR, NVIDIA Cloud XR.
Good to know.
All right. Dana, Carl, Vince, thank you so much for being on BIMThoughts.
Thank you very much for having me. It was an honor to be here, and it was a lot of fun.
Give Parsec a try. I was very impressed with their product, and I think you will be too.